Hello, welcome. Ooh, yeah, welcome. Cool. Welcome to History Chats this afternoon. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching us live, we're going to get started in just a bit here. As always, we're going to wait until 12:30. But if you're watching after the fact, skip ahead a little bit and we'll get to the program in just a moment. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm not going to look at that. That is, and you can't see what I'm looking at. That's fine. Yeah, so we're going to get started in just a second. Today we are finishing up February here. Odd as that seems, it seems like we just got into this. But our theme of sort of bits and pieces that we've been covering over the last few weeks, stuff that doesn't fit into other topics and things like that, we're going to culminate with some questions here. So we had asked for some questions, and we're going to answer some that have been posed. We'll get to that in just a second. While we're waiting, though, if you're not aware, this weekend we have a great program coming up. Rick Ryer from Wisconsin Public Radio is going to be joining us as part of our History Speaks series. And he's going to be talking about the history of Wisconsin's public media and the television, the radio, the role that it has, and the importance that it has had in the past. So, and the present and future, I guess, too. So you join us for that. That'll be this Saturday, the 26th at 2 o'clock. And we're going to be doing that again just live on YouTube and Facebook, the live functions here. So if you're watching this, this is the place to go to see that. Yeah. So that'll be coming up here. Let's see, what else do I usually say here? If during the course of this discussion that we're having here, or the program here, if you have any clarifying questions or comments or what have you, please feel free to put those into the comment section, chat section, whatever you're watching on, and should have some time to come back to that by the end. And also, we did, and I'll probably mention this again, but, this is the whole point of this particular program is we're going to be looking at public questions. Just because we are doing this now doesn't mean you can't continue to ask questions in the future. We're always interested to hear what people want to see or answer questions in general. So, don't hesitate to let us know if there are any questions in the future or things that come up that you go, I want to know more about that. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm gonna just jump in here. I'm not sure exactly how close we are. I know there's a little bit of a delay, but we'll just get started here. Hi. So, yeah, as I said, today we're finishing up our bits and pieces concept here, which we're, just little things that don't quite fit into a full month-long theme. And today, this is kind of one of the reasons that we did this, is I wanted to see if anybody had public questions. What questions do you want to know about our history, and how can we address those? So we reached out. I put some social media posts up. I've been mentioning it over the last few weeks. We got a couple. Specifically, we got 3 on Facebook here, and these are the 3 that I will end up talking about because I think they're pretty, useful questions here. So that's what we're gonna do. We'll start with Andrew's question here. He asks if we have any pictures of the Wassa paper mill and the 3M plant. It's a great question. Thanks for it. We do. Yep. Just what you want to see. That's usually why you ask a question. So here's 2 of them. This is the mill on the left side, the 3M, or factory, I guess, and then the paper mill on the right. I think this is from a flood, if I remember correctly, this particular picture. There's a bunch of those in the early years for sure. But you can kind of see the damage to the area here. I will say we have a lot more of the paper mill pictures than we do of the 3M plant. I think it might be something about 3M, Minnesota, 3M stands for Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. It's a Minnesota-based company. They certainly have a branch here, and I'm sure that there have been pictures taken of the plant, the facilities here over the years, but their archives aren't here, and they're still going too. Whereas when the Brokaw mill closed, the stuff, certainly, Wassa Papers is still around. But I think that because it's local, and also honestly, because it's hard to find a picture of Brokaw that doesn't include the mill in some ways, it's just part of the history there. We have a lot more pictures of that. So yeah, there's some pictures. We do have more. Maybe we'll get into these topics at some point in the future. Yeah, there you go. Jim asked if I would like to know about and see photos of when circuses came to Wassa. Where did they set up? When was the first time? When was the last time? So this is a very interesting question, and it took me on a bit of a research rabbit hole here that I wasn't expecting. Part of the difficulty here is what is considered a circus per se. There's different interpretations of what that means. Like some things that seem very circus-like are called carnivals or minstrel shows, vaudeville, like all these things kind of like performative, sideshows and things like that, attractions. They all kind of mix together in some ways. And so in certain periods, they're a little bit more clear-cut and that sort of thing. But particularly in the last, like the question here, last time that they came here, I don't actually know. I know that in general there's a slow decline over the years. A handful of the biggest circuses continued until I think the last touring circus, the Barnum and Bailey, closed in 2017. I think I found after like 146 years or something like that. But for the most part, a lot of the smaller carnivals and circuses had stopped a long time before that. And I don't know specifically when they first started, in part because, again, there's that ambiguity of like what is considered a circus. They might use the word circus, but is that, conform to what we expect it to be? I will say that there are very clear circuses that like, this sort of thing, trained seals, acrobats, horse riding, stuff like this. This is the Sells Brothers. They were one of the biggest circus acts, groups that would travel across and came here to Wassa during the period. They were very popular in the 1870s and 80s. I think by the mid 90s they had gone defunct. But this is one of those groups. And interestingly, I want to bring them up because when they would come to town, as they did in, say, 1884, 86, I think I have both on here actually. So, for example, here they would advertise, and they would often, this sort of like very colorful, very over the top sort of experience advertising. Hey, it's the greatest show on earth, greatest shows consolidated. At some point it comes to the point where like, okay, everybody's promising, and sometimes they just didn't end up being as exciting as they hoped. And sometimes this gets explicitly called out. Particularly the article that I'm pulling this from the 1980s, talking about a century earlier. They talked about how there was a guy, Colonel Hall, who had a troupe, and the papers would talk about how like, yeah, it was fine. It wasn't what they promised, but it was okay. And explicitly then they called out this one, which is the Sells Brothers. They were coming here. They were calling out the Anglo-American shows. So this is from the Wassa Pilots, part of their advertising. And I think it might be 86. I'm not entirely sure. I transcribed this from an article, but I might have typoed that one. But anyway, what did they say? Well, they said this. Be on your guard. A swindle has been exposed. A small miserly show is now advertised to appear in Wassa, June 21st, 1886. It is a base fraud. It advertises 100 cars. It has only 16. It advertises 4 advertising cars. It has none. It advertises a herd of giraffes. It has no giraffe. It advertises a herd of ostriches. It has not a feather. In fact, it is a small, miserly show devoid of anything of interest or amuse the people. Do not be misled. There is only one big show coming, and that is the Sells Brothers, and it is not exhibiting in Wausau until July 15th, which I think kind of speaks to this kind of like arms race in terms of like you have to like be bigger and better than your competitors, and at some point you just have to be like, look, they can't measure up. But this also tells us a little bit about the situation. Like there were in the 1880s, there were multiple carnivals and circuses that would stop in places like Wausau. As time went on, that became a little less, lesser of them. And I want to specifically talk about this one. So we received a donation of a few panoramas of the circus when it came here to Wausau in 1937. This is the Sells Sterling Circus, the four-ring circus, and this is from the big top here. I'm going to read a little bit of the advertising. This is what they advertised as what was going to be here in Wausau in this year. Savage, wild, and ferocious animals, and laugh-provoking and gloom-chasing clowns of the appetizing menu the Sells Sterling Circus will offer the white-top enthusiasts of Wausau tomorrow. The management of this circus has arranged a program that, for novelty and features, is said to be remarkable. Professor Fred Leonard, claimed to be the world's most famous horse and domestic animal trainer, appears with 3 groups of Lindemann's wonderfully trained horse acts. And the celebrated White Horse Troupe is in unusual, amazing military drills, dances, and novelty numbers. The Hagini Brothers riding act is featuring Joe Hagini, said to be the world's funniest riding comedian, and Miss Verna Lindemann, that dainty, charming lady rider whose amazing somersaults on the backs of galloping steeds are thrilling. There is that death-defying wild animal trainer, Captain Erwin Clauder of Germany, who puts through truly marvelous stunts of a big group of savage African lions in a steel arena. Cinderella in Jungle Land, a beautiful and gorgeous presentation of new fairy tales, will serve as the opening spectacle. This musical extravaganza requires a cast of several hundred artists, as well as a score of animal actors. And that was what they were advertising. And I think, getting back to the idea of what is making a circus, this is a circus. You got trained animals, you got under the big top. That's kind of what makes this important in some ways. But it wasn't the only thing. But before I get into all the actual stuff that you could see here, in addition to the stuff you can see in this, acrobats, horses, elephants, all that fun stuff, let's talk a little bit about this particular circus company, because it's kind of interesting. The Sells Sterling Circus was run by the Lindemann brothers out of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. There's a lot of these kind of middling to small to big companies that would operate out of Wisconsin. For some reason, this is just a very circusy state. And the Lindemann brothers had experience touring with other circuses as well as their own for a bit. But in 1924, they started the inaugural tour of this company, the Sells Sterling Circus. And you will note the similarity here to the Sells Brothers, which again had been defunct for a number of years, at 20 years at this point, but still had a following. People still remembered the Sells Brothers, even though the name Sells Brothers or Sells Circus was actually already copywritten by the Barnum and Bailey folks. And so they actually changed the name. As you can see, it's Seils. And that's a way to say, no, we're not copying the Sells Brothers name. So there you go. Now they're the Seals Brothers, or I think they probably just pronounced it Sells, but I don't entirely know. And they toured throughout the 20s, late 20s, early 30s. By the end of the 1930s, though, things were getting rough for their financial situation. I've seen things that blame this on the Great Depression, but I've also seen things that maybe indicate that maybe it's just a big expense. They had a huge show in 36 and 37. So by 38, they gave their final performance on July 4th, 1938 in Iron Mountain, Michigan. And then by September, they were auctioning off the equipment and stuff that it had closed. But during its time here, particularly the year before, 1937, it was a big show. Oh, let me bring up some of the other panoramas here. So this is, I don't know how full of a group this is. This is the four-ring circus here, so we can see all of the individuals here. I will say these are, scans of a reprint panoramas that were scanned by somebody else. So the quality is not as good as I'd love it to be, but you can still get a sense of, what's happening here. Lots of clowns. Apparently the head clown was the best paid individual in the whole company. Beautiful costumes, often Oriental in theme, whether that's, Chinese or Mongolian or what have you. Got some of the side acts here, and then you got some bands. And number of big tents. The contrast here is kind of hard to see, but there's a couple different tents going back here too. Sideshows are interesting too. So this is the main act under the big top, the carnivals, but you can see all of the novelty things here. Girl walking on a sword ladder, magicians. You got Punch and Judy, the puppets, sort of in the British background there. Ventriloquist. You have Miss Verona, the girl that defies the electricity. Maybe like a Faraday cage or something, I'm not sure. Oriental dancing girls. You got Hawaiian Village. Professor Samson, the human art gallery, who is actually, you can see him here. Lots of tattoos. So that's a thing. Ladies in the back with some interesting swords and a saber and guitar. Minstrel band, Southern Melodies, so that's these gentlemen here. I don't know if they would have actually, I'm guessing that most of these people are from the Midwest, so these guys might not have actually been from the Southern communities, but, they could play the music and be close enough. Oh, they might have been too, hard to know. Expert axe throwing and knife throwing, Lady Snake Charmer. And then over here you have, in the bottom here, the midget, Captain Claude, and Jolly Tiny, the fat boy. And you can see them here. Interesting point of note, this guy here, the fat boy, so-called, his name is Clifford Kruger. Some of you may remember him as the state senator from Merrill for many, many, many years. This was his high school job for the summer. In between his junior and senior years, he went and toured as the fat boy. He was like 320 something pounds, but he remembered that they promoted him as 404 pounds. So he did that in 36, and then after senior high school, before he went on to college, I think he went to college. This was his job here too. So got paid to kind of sit around and be the fat boy, I guess. So yeah, a lot of local people. These people would kind of come and go as the time went. They'd pick up more people for the shows, for the roadie type people. People going around, and then they would drop them as they went, and that's just kind of par for the course. But ideally, these guys all stick around because these are the sort of highlighted people. This also brings up the other question though that was asked, which is where are they? Where did they set up? And that's a little harder to say offhand. Here's another panorama here, the ladies lined up, and this is a little clearer. We can see, there's a smokestack back here. We think this is either Wassa Brewing or possibly the with Marathon Rubber. And there's some houses here. So we know we're not at Marathon Park, which is one of the places that they would sometimes go, although this is pretty expansive. They had lots of tents. So they couldn't just, set up on the track, but the railroad going through there is kind of helpful. As to where they went, let me, excuse me. I found a couple different places. I know that there were probably more. But down here I've seen some things. This is Grand Avenue and Broadway. The cemetery is just right here. Apparently this was a place that they would go sometimes and set up. Marathon Park here. Let me actually turn there we go. Marathon Park. Fairgrounds before it was the park. That was a place you could get off and have a big open space. This particular instance, though, in 1937 was actually here. It was on 8th and Sherman Street, which again, the railroad comes through. It's kind of close. Of course, none of these houses would really be here at this point, so it'd be a big open field, which is kind of what you want. And then the other location that I often see the fairs set up is up here, which is now John Muir Middle School, but was a big open field. And if we go back to as you can see here, This is an aerial photo taken actually 100 years ago, May 26th, 1922. And you can see the Snap Brothers Carnival. It's a spring carnival that they had. You got the mammoth riding devices that they were known for. Maybe what sets this apart from the circus. But yeah, these sort of events they'd set up on the field here. And this just gives you a sense of like, even by the time that the 37 circus that we've been looking at, I don't think there'd be too much developed. This is 17th Avenue and Stewart. So yeah, just kind of gives an interesting perspective to think about at that time. Often they don't actually say where it is. They're just like, it's adjacent to, go out to Marathon Park, and then it's kind of around that region. You'll find it. So there you go. That's a lot of circus stuff. Hopefully that answers the question there. I want to end, or kind of end with the third one here with this question. Now, I know I did joke about us making up questions if nobody asked them. In this case, that's not what happened. This is actually Cheryl. So Cheryl does some of our social media, is our events person here. And for some reason, when you have access to the Facebook account, sometimes it just defaults making you comment as the organization. So I think that's what happened here. But as you can see, this is actually Cheryl commented this. And she asks this interesting question about sister cities. Does Wausau have a sister city? Now, again, we kind of have to talk about what is a sister city first. There's an old colloquial usage of it, of just being two cities that are kind of connected geographically. You know, sometimes Marshfield and Wisconsin Rapids are sister cities because they're the two big cities in Wood County, for example. So sometimes Wausau's sister city might be within the context of talking about our sister city, Marshfield, or Stevens Point, or Anago, or Merrill, you know, kind of close by. Sometimes the sister city is association for other reasons. It's because we have industrial concerns here. The Wausau guys set up some paper and some lumbering down in Mississippi, so Laurel, Mississippi, that's our sister city. Or maybe up in you know, Marathon, Ontario, where we had a paper factory that the Wausau or the Marathon Corporation set up. Like maybe that could be a sister city. But the sort of modern concept of there being a formal association where, you know, it's an agreement between two municipalities, usually not in the same country, that's something that doesn't emerge until the 50s. Dwight Eisenhower, in 1956, he sets up this kind of sets in motion this idea, and this leads to the creation of Sister Cities International, which is a nonprofit global organization that is designed to put people in touch. So if you become a member, you know, you pay a fee, and they will basically keep up an official association between different cities. And this has become one of the things that happens. Here in Wausau, though, specifically, Cheryl asked about Wausau. In the 1980s, again, I don't think that there was a formal one earlier, but 1988, Liz Chilson, who was involved in some sort of relief stuff, some discussion about Nicaragua at the time. Nicaragua had been through a bit of a civil war, maybe still was. I'm not entirely sure about the chronology there. But there's sort of an attempt, specifically from Wisconsin, trying to promote relief aid and that sort of thing. And she was putting forth this idea of like, we should make it a sister city. In order to understand what's happened in Nicaragua, we should, you know, create this formal association between, you know, us, Wausau, and Nicaragua. And so she starts to kind of put this idea out there and kind of popularize it in some articles that she wrote, like this one from 1988. This gets picked up by that's Nicaragua. So it's down here in Central America here. I didn't want to assume that everybody knew where that was, so there you go. Now the Wausau Daily Herald picks on this, and they say, this is a great idea, but it shouldn't be Nicaragua. It should be Laos. And their reasoning here is, hey, we've got a lot of Southeast Asians now that are living here and have come in the last few years. You know, 1989, this is about a decade of the Hmong starting to arrive here. And so, hey, look, these Southeast Asian people that are now in our community, they're struggling to adapt, and it would be helpful for us to understand where they came from, so why don't we choose a city from the country where they came from, Laos? And it's a good idea in theory, except I mean, the Hmong have a very complicated relationship with the state of Laos. They had fled because the Laotian government fell to the communists, and the state that in 1989 was still and still to this day is the same institution. They kind of just went out and hunted down the Hmong and put them in camps and tried to slaughter them all. And there's real concerns. Like even here, a decade later, in the mid 90s, there is a real concern about like the refugee camps in Thailand. Like if they get repatriated back to Laos, there are certain people that like high profile people that we test case, we try to send them back, and they just disappear. And there's real concerns about the safety of these Hmong refugees. And so the idea of Wassa, this new home for the Hmong people in central Wisconsin, associating and validating the existence of the Laotian state, I don't think was super popular. Like it does kind of speak to the fact that and I'm reading between the lines here to be clear. I don't know for sure this is the case, but I would have to imagine that the Hmong people here, like every time that you see articles, there's a few of them saying, "Hey, we should have a sister city in Laos." It's usually white people, and I don't know that they've talked to any Hmong people saying this is a good idea. So my guess is this is what happens. And instead, by the time that here again, here's Laos. That's where Laos is if you need help. This is Southeast Asia here. So China, Malaysia. But in 1994, we get approval. The city council approves a sister city. But by this point, it has shifted. It still is a Asian city. We still want to be in Asia. And instead, we go with Saiping, China, which is a China. So here's where Saiping is. It's in the Jilin province. My pronunciation's probably bad there. But there they are. They're up here. It's a city of about 400,000 people. In the metro area, there's like 2.5 million. So it's not really Wassa's size, but it's a similar climate. There's a similar level of industry. And I think what the big deal here is it's very associated with the ginseng. Because Wassa is a very ginseng-heavy location, this makes sense. And the idea for sister cities is it's not just like a metaphor, like a PR type thing. It is literally like, well, we'll send people over there. We'll develop industry connections. We'll develop political connections. We can kind of get to know each other. And this does happen over the next few years. We send some delegations over there to see the city and to meet people. They send some over here. There's an exchange of students. Excuse me. And it seems like it's going well. By 96, they're considering maybe expanding it. And they're specifically looking at, hey, maybe we should have a second sister city. We can do that. Maybe someplace in Ukraine. And I have to say, this is a weird time that this is the first time that I mentioned Ukraine this particular week. That wasn't intentional, but weird times. This doesn't end up happening despite, I don't think it did. And again, could be wrong on some of this, but even by the year 2000, for the county, they wanted to maybe establish some sort of connection as part of they even set aside like $600 for dues to join Sister Cities International to make this connection. And they're looking specifically at Ukraine because Ukraine is a very agricultural area. And so that made sense to kind of make those connections. But that doesn't happen, and I think partially because of our original sister city with China comes to a bit of a souring, that relationship. In 1997, a bunch of an agricultural delegation from China is stopped at the border with Vancouver. And they're trying to cross over from Canada into the United States, and they're stopped in part because they provide fake letters. So they have a forged signature. They basically took the letterhead of Wassa's mayor. And apparently one of them was kind of decent, but one of them was just like, they didn't even match the font. They just kind of like cut and pasted a bunch of stuff, made a copy of it. And the idea was so instead of flying into Chicago and then up to Wassa, through the Mosinee airport, which is what they were supposed to do, they wanted to get in so that they could have a little bit more time. They didn't just want to stay for 3 days. They wanted to stay and go see Disneyland and New York, and that wasn't on the itinerary. But they're detained, and they go, "Hey, Wassa, you're our sister city. You can help us. You can vouch for us, right?" And of course, the officials here can't no, we can't just let you in. We don't have that sort of power, even if it was legit. And so they're sent back home. And after this point, the exchange kind of dries up. By 2000, or by the, so for example, the Daily Herald is still pretty excited about the idea of a sister city, and many people are. Although I think in Clear, this article is kind of saying like, maybe China's not the place that we should go. But the idea there is good. But ultimately, what ends up happening is by the end of the 1990s, we just decide we're not going to do this. Again, this is the Daily Herald trying to say, hey, we should keep it going. But by this point, Mayor Linda Lawrence, who's now in the office, she says like the only interaction they have is one of the translators from Saiping occasionally sends them a Christmas card, and that's the only official association with China, with the sister city. And so why should we continue to keep this up if there isn't that interaction? And so we dropped the association, and yeah. And again, I could be wrong, but as far as I can tell, there have, despite attempts to try to make some connections, perhaps, at least Wausau and Marathon County cities have not continued that. Although our neighbors do. Stevens Point, it's been a big part of them. They have not one, but three different sister cities, with Poland, Russia, and Nicaragua. So, it's not a dead thing. It's just not something that Wausau has, in Marathon County, has pursued. So yeah, that's the three questions. And I'm just going to put back here. There we go. I'm going to check to see if any questions popped up, any comments or what have you. But yeah. As I said at the beginning, like if in the future, I want to do this again. Hopefully, we can find a better streamlined way to solicit questions in the future. So if you do have, always keep that in mind. I think it'd be cool to come back and tackle these couple little things every once in a while. But for now, I think that that's February. Oh, I know. While I'm waiting, why don't I tell you a little bit about next week, because next week is a new month, and so we're going to return to the concept of March Mapness, which is a fun concept that we did last year. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to take, I think it's 5 weeks in March this year. We're going to look at 5 different maps, and specifically look at a state of Wisconsin and the counties, look at school maps, look at a topographical map, and we're going to take a couple different takes on this and tell what stories they are. And that's going to be the kind of thing. Maps are awesome, and they often don't get the opportunity to shine on their own, and so that's the goal here. We're going to take a look at some maps and the very cool stories that you can see from them. So yeah, that'll start next week. Next week we're going to look at specifically some county maps to show how does Marathon County get that unique shape, that rectangle with a little notch cut out? Because that is not how we come out of, when we're formed in 1850, that's not how we look. So I'm going to take you through some maps to see the evolution of the county borders and see how we came to be what we are today. So that'll be a fun program. All right. Well, I don't see any questions or comments or whatever, so I think we'll let you go. Yeah, thanks. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to our next talk next week. In the meantime, have a wonderful week. Yeah, we'll see you next time.